Hey everyone, Zach here from Windows Central and welcome back to another video. Now today we're taking another look at the Microsoft Surface Duo emulator because this is the only real way we can take a look at how Microsoft is progressing when it comes to the OS side of development for Surface Duo. As you all know, Surface Duo runs Android, and we had already taken a look at the Surface Duo emulator earlier this year when Microsoft released the first Surface Duo SDK. It's come a long way since then. Now, it's still not done. This video still is not representative of the final product. I'm sure it's missing features and changes that will be in the retail products that aren't in this build, but it has come a long way, and you'll probably see that comparing this video with the first video we did. So let's not waste time. Let's dive straight in. You can see this is my home screen here. Now, if you want to go and try the emulator yourself, keep in mind you will not get this experience. This is something that's taken me forever to customize and get working because you have to go and find all of these different apps. By default, the emulator has nothing in it. It's a bare bones version of the Surface Duo OS for developers to test their own apps. So just keep that in mind. Anyhow, this is the home screen I've come up with. You can see along the bottom here, and if we swipe over to the activity feed, that blur effects are working now, and I think they look pretty good. Everything looks very clean and minimalist, and animations are working much better now. If you remember in the first video we did, animations were pretty broken. They're still not perfect in this build, but they're definitely better. For example, if we open, say, Office, you'll see here that if I swipe up, to close an app, you swipe up, the animation more or less works as expected now, and all of the dock will flow nicely. It's still not perfect, but it's definitely much better. If we open that app again, we can also use that same gesture to swipe over to the left screen or back to the right. And we can also use this bar to dock an app to the center display. If we let go, it will then span across both screens. That's still working, and in fact, it's much more fluid now, which is good to see. Some of the animation lag you're seeing might actually just be a result of this being in an emulator. Running on actual hardware, I'm told these animations are very smooth, so that's good to hear. So while we're on the home screen, let's actually take a look at customizing it. To customize the home screen, we just simply tap and hold in an empty space and we'll get thrown into this UI. This UI allows us to add things like new home screens if that's something you want to do, or delete them. And we can even set different pages as our home page. So if I want to set the shelf as a home page, I can do that from this UI. So when I go home, the shelf will show up by default on the left screen instead of two home screens like this. Some people prefer having the shelf always on display. For me, however, I prefer having two home screens because that gives me much more customization. So if we go back in here, we can also change our wallpaper, and that will take us into the Android settings app, which allows us to then go in and change our own wallpaper. We can use Bing images if we want, or we can use our own images as well. We can also get access to the Add Widgets area here, which allows us to add widgets to the home screen, which is super nice as well. To get access to these home screen's actual settings, however, you don't go through this UI, at least not in this build. And to do that, we go into the settings app itself, go down to Display, and then there's this home screen option for customizing your home screen and feed. If we click on that, we'll then be taken into this UI where we can customize things such as your feed, your search UI, so we can actually change the search bar style here. By default, it's set to sort of semi-rounded corners. Then we can get even more rounded corners, and then we can just make it totally round if that's what you prefer. We'll keep it as default for now though. We've got search suggestions, search preferences. We can change our search engine if that's something you want to do, search country and region, and more. Then there's also app drawer settings, which we'll get to in a second, notification badges, which we can enable or disable. We also have show page indicators, which I've turned off. We can lock the home screen so that you won't accidentally move icons around, and automatically add new apps to the home screen if that's what we want to do as well. So that's a super quick look at the home screen settings. Again, this isn't final. I'm sure there'll be many more features and settings to customize in the final product, but for now, that's what we're looking at in this pre-release build. So let's take another look at the activity feed over here. This is where you get access to everything going on your device. You have your recent activities, which is all of your photos, as well as recent messages, installed apps, and open documents. And then we have our calendar. So any upcoming events will show up here. We can, in fact, add a new event using this UI. Select Outlook, and I can begin adding an event. Birthday party. It's not an all-day event. It's, let's see, what time is it? Let's make it from 1:30 to 2:30. And there we go. So that should now hopefully, with any luck, if I did it right, there it is. There's the birthday party coming at 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. in 47 minutes. A very short party, might I add, and also in the middle of the day. But hey, you get the point. Then we also have tasks, which syncs up with the Microsoft To Do app. I can add a task straight through here. Clean the kitchen. Done. There we go. That will now sync to my Microsoft To Do. Then we have the Sticky Notes app here, which will sync with the Sticky Notes app on Windows 10. If I tap on Create New Note here, I can create a text note, an ink note, a voice note, or an image note. Creating an ink note will always be fun because Surface Duo, of course, supports pen, so you'll be able to just come in here and draw smiley faces if that's what you want to do, and that will sync with the Windows 10 app. Then we have frequently used apps, documents, and more. We can edit this view and add things. I believe there will be screen time in here at some point, but again, it's not here right now because this is pre-release software. But that's a very quick look at the activity feed. If we come over to the news tab here, you'll see that we also have the news tab with all of its doom and gloom. You can customize this and change all of the topics that show up here. So if we click in here, news interests, we can turn off certain things. Let's turn off news. Let's leave entertainment. Entertainment's always fun. Hopefully that... Oh, and technology. I like technology. There we go. So if we go back to the home feed and refresh it, we should now have just the interests of our choice, which is super nice. So that's a quick look at the activity feed. We also have our search bar over here, which is actually hidden up here as well if you want to access it that way. If we tap on the search bar here, it does search related things. So if I want to look for an app or a contact or a search or a web results, I can do that using this UI. So if I want to look for, say, Instagram, I can type Instagram, we get our search results up top here, and then we have the app results down there. Then I can launch that app from this UI if I want to, which is super nice. Let's close you off. Now, if we move on to the apps list, we can get access to that by simply swiping up on either display. I did that on the right display, but if I swipe up on the left display, it will do the same thing. And from here, we can get access to all of our installed apps. We have a couple of customization options up here, such as show recent apps, which if I turn that on, that will show 4 apps above everything else that I have recently opened. And then we have the option to group apps alphabetically, which is good if you're somebody who prefers that method of organizing your apps list. And we can also add gadgets from this UI to the home screen as well, if that's something you want to do. While we're here, we can also add new icons to the home screen if we want to. We can do that just by tapping and holding, and then the apps drawer will drop down and we can pin an app like that. Or we can tap and hold and then press add to home like that, and then we can drag our icon around as we want. Let's add these over here and put these into a folder and unpin you. There we go. So I now have a couple of more apps on the home screen, and I can name this folder, say, Office. Done. There we go. So I want to take a few minutes talking about what it's like to actually manipulate the operating system. Things like navigating gestures, spanning apps, opening apps on different screens. How does that all work? So let's start with opening apps on different displays. How does that work? Well, there are multiple different ways to do it. The first way is by tapping on an icon on the screen you want it to open on. So if I want to open Instagram on the right display, I'd tap its icon on the right screen here. If I want to open that same app on the left display, I'd have to make sure that icon was being displayed on the left display first before I tap on it, and then it would open on the left screen. But even then, once the app is open, I can move it across screens if I want to, just by swiping the bar along the bottom there and moving it to the right display, or I can move it back to the left one if I want to, or I can even just pick the app up and drag it over the bezel myself and then let go on the other side. So that's how that works. If we swipe up to go home like that, that will take us home. In regards to gesture navigation, it all works as you would expect. Swiping up will take you home like that. Swiping up and holding will take you to the multitasking UI, which allows you to swipe through all of your open apps. From here, I can dismiss an app entirely, or I can actually open an app on the other screen just by swiping it over to the other display and letting go. Swiping from the left or right will go back. And with these spanning capabilities, I can simply drag up, align with the center bezel, and then let go, and then the app will span across both displays like that. So that's how gesture navigation works. Very intuitive and very simple. It's not hard to learn. So the beauty of having dual screens is that it allows you to do 2 things at once. On a single screen phone, if I want to go into another app, I have to close the current app I'm in. But on Surface Duo, that's not the case. So I can be having a conversation with a friend on one screen and looking at information on another screen. So right now my friend's asking me for places in mind in regards to looking for a restaurant this evening. So I can just open up Microsoft Edge on the left display here, look for nearby restaurants. There we go. Can take a look through here. And if this was a group conversation, that group conversation could still be going, and I could glance over and take a look at that and update my search results on the fly, depending on what people say. Let's see here. We have this place, the guilt trip. Why not? I can then copy this URL and then say over here, how about here? Question mark. Can then paste that link. Send that off, and I've now been able to find that result without even leaving the Messages app here. So that's just one example of what dual screens can do for you. It also makes sense with spanning as well. Of course, we demoed spanning earlier, but we'll do it again here. If we close both of these apps and open, say, Outlook, we can span this app, and then we can have our email on the left and then our email contents on the right screen. So if you want to see more of one app at a time, you can do that. But it's worth mentioning, not all apps support spanning. All of them can span, but most of them, at least third-party ones, won't have a dedicated spanning UI. For example here, if we open up, say, Spotify, this is the standard Spotify Android app, and it works just fine on a single screen. But if we try to span it here, you'll see that while it can span, it doesn't have a dedicated UI that knows to get out of the way of the center bezel. So the bezel here is cutting through album art and is covering up the search button in the navigation bar at the bottom here. So that's what will happen if you're trying to span apps that don't have a native spanning UI, which will be most third-party apps, at least at launch. Who knows, down the line, perhaps app developers will update their apps to support dual screens. But as of right now, and I believe at launch, most third-party apps won't. But most of Microsoft's apps will, and even if apps don't support spanning, it's not the end of the world, because those apps still run absolutely fine on single screen mode, just like this. In fact, if I fold the screen around, you'll see that it now just looks like a normal Android phone, and Spotify knows no different. It's just going to operate as it would normally, which is super nice. So in regards to using two apps across both displays, Microsoft Launcher on Surface Duo has a unique feature called app grouping, which allows you to group two apps under one icon and open them both at the same time across both displays on Surface Duo. So let's demo that now. If I tap and hold on WhatsApp, for example, press on the little arrow here, then press on Groups, I can pair WhatsApp with another app. So let's pair it with Instagram here, press Done. I can now name this app group, so let's just call it Gram. Damn. Press OK. And now we have that app group on the home screen. So now whenever I tap on that icon, it will open both apps at the same time across both displays. And I can even customize which apps open on what display. So if I close both of these here, tap and hold, press Edit, I can swap those around. So Instagram opens on the left and WhatsApp opens on the right. Press OK. So when I tap on that again, it will open the apps on the other screens instead. So this is great if you have a couple of apps that you usually have open at the same time. Instead of having to open them manually, you can just set them under one icon and open it like that instead, which is much preferred and much quicker as well. Now, since Surface Duo is a dual screen phone, you can actually fold the screens all the way around and use it as a single screen phone if you want. And I actually think that's a mode you'll be using more often than you think. Here it is in single screen mode, and it's now basically a normal Android phone. I can open up apps and just type into them and they work as expected. And in fact, a lot of people ask me, how do you type on Surface Duo with dual screens? And the answer is by folding one of the screens all the way around. This is the most comfortable way to type on Surface Duo, just like this. So that's how you're going to be typing for the most part. And again, in this mode, it operates like a normal single-screened phone. Now, you may have noticed in the apps list a dedicated calendar app. This app is actually just the Outlook app, but split into its own icon for the calendar. If I tap on calendar here, it will take me directly into the calendar app inside the Outlook app. And I can still open the Outlook app on the other display and check my email. So you can run both at the same time, but it is technically the same app. You can get access to the calendar in Outlook, and you can get access to email in the calendar app, and it still works just the same. So that's a unique change on Surface Duo, and if you didn't notice, you also get the date in the icon, which is a nice touch as well. Now, I know lots of you are interested in seeing what Surface Duo looks like when in dark mode. We can do that for you now by going into Display and enabling Dark Theme. This will change the system elements, inbox apps, and indeed the Microsoft Launcher to a dark mode as well, and I think it looks pretty nice. So now I want to take a few minutes taking a look at some of Microsoft's inbox apps and what they look like when spanned, because as far as I'm aware, all of Microsoft's built-in apps on Surface Duo will support spanning. Now, we don't have all of the apps that will be shipping on the retail unit here, we just have a couple of them, but it still gives us a good idea as to what we can expect. So let's start with Microsoft Edge. Microsoft Edge is a weird one because most web pages won't support spanning, but you can still span the app, and the app does have a dedicated UI for it. It looks just like this. Some websites will be able to support spanning. That's something web developers can write support for, but right now most websites don't have that support. But the UI at the top does have the support here. We can see we have our drop down menus. If we tap on an area here, that will take up one full screen and stuff, and that looks pretty nice. Let's close you off. We've already taken a look at Outlook, but we haven't in dark mode, so let's just take another look at it real quick. If we span it, we get our email list on the left, and then if we tap on an email, we get our email contents on the right. And there's also a spanning UI for the calendar app as well. We have our calendar on the left, and if we tap on an event, we get our event details on the right, which looks pretty nice. We then have OneNote over here. OneNote also supports spanning. If we pick it up and dock it now, on the left, we get access to our notebook pages, and on the right, we get access to the notes themselves. I can tap in here, move the keyboard over, and say, hey, this is a note. And I can even draw into here as well with another smiley face, which is super nice. Now, if you move on to Office, Office also has a spanning mode, and on the left side we get our recent open documents, and on the right we have the document itself. So if I tap on History Report here, that will open up Word on the right display and keep the Office Hub on the left display, just like that. Super nice indeed. We can close you off and then close you off as well. Moving on, Microsoft To Do also supports spanning and works as you would expect. On the left side, we get access to our current tasks, and if we tap on one of those tasks on the right display, we get more details about that task. Now, I know you may have noticed there the emulator doesn't have Play services running, but don't worry, the actual Surface Duo device does, so it will have access to the Play Store and whatnot, just the emulator doesn't. Moving on, if we open up, say, OneDrive, OneDrive is very similar to the Office app in that if we span it, on the left we get our sort of files, and on the right we get file previews. So if I click on this photo here, for example, I can now see that photo on the right screen. If I open up a document, I actually get a brief overview of what's in that document on the right display, which is nice. Then I can press on Edit in Word and open me into Office, where I can now begin working on this file that I just opened in the OneDrive app, which is super nice. Let's close you and close you as well. So that's just a quick look at some of Microsoft's apps when they're spanned. Again, that's not all of the Microsoft apps that will be pre-installed. That's just a handful of them. And so far, I think it's looking pretty good. The other thing you can do with dual screens is drag and drop. So if I open up, say, the Office app again, why not? And go into a Word document, this one will do nicely over here. So now I have Word open on the right display. If I open up Edge on the left display here, I can highlight some text on this web page like that. Then I can actually just drag this text and let go in the other app, and that will paste into Word. So drag and drop does work. Not in all apps, might I add, but in some of them definitely. So these are what notifications look like. I know one popped up earlier, but we'll take another look now. If we leave that to go away, if we swipe down on either screen, we can get access to the notification center here. And from here, we can obviously interact with our notifications. And those notifications also show up on the lock screen as well, which if we get access to now, there we go. On the left display, we get our date and time, as well as quick access to our torch and camera app. And on the right display, we have our incoming notifications, which we can deal with here or dismiss entirely if we want to. If we swipe up here, we can get access to our PIN, or we can use fingerprint to log in. And then we're back on the home screen. Now let's take a quick look at the settings app on Surface Duo, because Microsoft has made some minor changes to it. If we come into Bluetooth here and go down to Surface Pen, we can change the writing hand for the Surface Pen to left or right, depending on which you are. I'm sure this will be a little bit more fleshed out at launch, but right now that's the only option you can configure. If we go down to wallpaper, we have the option for Surface wallpapers, which at least in this build, there are no images in that folder, but I'm assuming in the retail unit, there will be some stock Microsoft wallpapers in there for you to choose from. Of course, we've already taken a look at the home screen area, which we can customize through this UI. And if you scroll down, there's a dedicated Microsoft category, which allows us to set up things like photo sync with OneDrive and contact sync with Outlook. If I tap on backup photos with OneDrive, that would take me to the OneDrive app where I can configure camera upload. And if I tap on sync contacts with Outlook, that will take me into the Outlook app where I can now sync contacts with the Android Contacts app, which is super nice. Below that, we have the option to send diagnostic data to Microsoft, which is off. This is optional diagnostic data, which if you want to turn on, you can do. If we come into system and go to gestures, there are a couple of system navigation gesture choices. We have gesture navigation, which is what we've shown, but then we have the more traditional 3-button navigation as well. And the 3-button navigation is interesting because it's like a hybrid. It's buttons, but there's still gestures to it because you still need gestures for things like spanning. So if we enable 3-button here, give it just a second to adjust because it takes a couple of seconds in the emulator. So with 3-button navigation enabled, I can tap on an app to open it and then press on the home button to go home instead of having to swipe up. And that works as you would expect. But to span apps, I still have to swipe up and drag to the center bezel. That's why the home button is still a bar, because there's still gestures to it. If I swipe up, I can then dock to the center bezel, and that's how that works. But otherwise, it works as a navigation bar. I can press the back button to go back, and I also have my multitasking view button here as well. So if you're somebody who prefers button navigation, you can configure that on Surface Duo, but by default, it's set to gestures because obviously that's a little bit more intuitive for the dual screen setup. Now, it's worth mentioning that Surface Duo treats the right display as the main display, and there's a reason for that. If you look above the right display, you'll see that the speaker grill and camera modules are there, and that's what Microsoft is using to determine the right display as the main display, and I do not think that's configurable. The right display being the main display simply means things like notifications and phone calls only show up on the right screen. So if I send that notification again, you'll see that it pops up on the right and not the left, and there's nothing I can see in settings that allows me to change that. If I send a phone call here as well, that will also show up on the right screen if I press answer. And again, the reason for this is because the camera and speaker grill for the phone is above the right screen. So when you're on a phone call, you're going to fold the screens around on each other and put the right screen up against your face because that's where the audio is coming out on the phone call. That's simply the only reason as far as I can tell. Otherwise, in every other situation, it doesn't matter. The left display is just as equal as the right display. Now, another unique change Microsoft has made to SwiftKey on Surface Duo is that when you're using the device in portrait mode, the keyboard will take up one whole screen, just like a sort of mini laptop. So if we change the orientation of the device now and tap into this text field, you'll see that SwiftKey takes up the entire bottom display. So I can begin typing. Hello there. Oh, if I could type, that is. This is a... Man, I can't type. This is a test. There we go. And you can resize this one as well. So if we go here, we can actually resize that. So if you're somebody who likes the entire screen to be the keyboard, you can do that as well. And again, this is like a mini sort of laptop mode or compose mode, I think is what Microsoft calls it officially. So if you need to bang out a sort of medium-sized email, you can do that on Surface Duo and it should work quite nicely. In fact, while we're here, let's take a quick look at Surface Duo when it is in portrait mode. You can see that the home screen does support that. If we swipe to the left here, we get access to our apps list, which works on either screen. If we swipe to the right, we get our recent activity feed. Over here, we can open apps. So if we open up that, we can do that there, and we can open Outlook up here. And we can still span, of course. So if we take Outlook and span it to the center bezel, that will then take up all of the displays and will give me a super long list of emails. Now this mode I think makes the most sense in Microsoft Edge when you're reading web pages, which are often quite long. If we dock this to the center bezel, you'll see that now I'm getting a super long list of search results here without having to scroll as much, which I think is super nice. So there you have it. That's a quick look at the latest build of the Surface Duo emulator. Again, this isn't final. There's still lots of stuff to come, and I'm sure the retail units will be way more polished than what's in this video. But I figured it gives us a good look at what Microsoft has done so far, and I'm pretty excited about it. So thanks again for watching, and we shall see you in the next one. Bye-bye.